Hi y'all, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be tier ranking popular romance books. If you guys have been watching me for a while, you know romance is my favorite genre, so I feel like I do have tons of opinions on a lot of these popular romance books because I have read them over the years and I continuously read romance reads, so I feel like I kind of know what are some good ones and what are necessarily some that are not so good. So let's just dive right in. We have a couple of different tiers. The top best tier is God tier. So this is a tier that it's a 5-star, a 6-star, amazing romance read. You cannot not read it. Next up is You're Missing Out. So yes, I recommend it. Obviously, you're missing out if you haven't read it. I thought it was great. Well done. Perfect. Next up is Decent. This is like a 3-star read. It's all right. If you don't read it, you're not really missing out on anything too crazy. Next tier is You Should Pass. Like, I'm actively telling you, I do not recommend it and you probably shouldn't read it. And last but not least, this is not romantic. Why is this in this romance genre? So I think we have 26 popular romance books, so let's just dive right in. I tried to get some that are like Book Talk OG books that were really popular in like the early 2020s up until now. So we have some new releases that were released as soon as last month, and then some from over the years. So first one being Happy Place by Emily Henry. This one I think I'm gonna rate, I think I'm gonna go with You're Missing Out. I actually really liked this book. I think I rated it like 4.5, 4.75 stars. It was almost a 5-star read for me. But the thing that's interesting about this book is that it wasn't an almost 5-star read necessarily because of the romance. It was mostly because this book is just so well written in the sense that it's not just a romance between partner to partner. There's so much discussion on the topic of love in general. So that's like with friends, with family. I feel like the romance is still really good and I really liked the characters. We have Harriet and Wynn who are like exes. So it's kind of like a second chance romance. And I know this book is very much highly rated. So I would say You're Missing Out if you haven't read it, and I would recommend it. Next up, Just for the Summer. I actually just read this like last week. I will put it in You're Missing Out. I think it's a very well written romance. Emma and Justin are deemed good luck charms for their like romantic partners. And what I mean by that is like Emma will date someone and then once they break up, that someone meets his soulmate the next date. And Justin also deems himself this like good luck charm. So they had the idea of getting together, they break up, and then theory would be that they would meet their partners. So it's a very interesting premise. I did have some small critiques of this book, but overall, it's an amazing, phenomenal romance written by Abby Jimenez. I feel like Abby Jimenez has struck gold in writing a male main character. She just really knows what she's doing. They're always so vulnerable, so romantic, so caring, and I love to see that in romances. That is the definition of romance for me. It's one of her best works. It's not my favorite by her, but it's definitely one you shouldn't miss. Funny Story by Emily Henry. I'm gonna go with decent. Now, with that being said, I did still really like this. I think I rated it 4 stars, so obviously that's still a really good, solid rating. Not one of my favorites by her, honestly, but it's still a very good romance. I feel even bad maybe putting it decent. Like, I would consider it in the You're Missing Out and decent realm. This is about Miles and Daphne, and for this book specifically, I actually really did like the premise. It's a bit confusing, so stay with me, but Miles and Daphne are living together because they were each engaged to different partners, and then those partners were best friends. They each dumped Daphne and Miles, and now the fiancés are together, which left Miles and Daphne like single and not knowing where to live. So now they live together as roommates. This is a very unconventional pairing, but I feel like that premise does make it, you know what, I'm gonna move it up. Yep. And I'm gonna put these in order too. So I'm gonna go with 3rd place in the You're Missing Out because that premise is so creative and I really haven't read anything like that, and I will give it its fair points for that because that made it really enjoyable. Emily Henry, I feel like, is just queen of one-liners. Like, some of her quotes are just so phenomenal. They really make you believe in love, make you believe in the chemistry between her characters. 7 Days in June. Sorry you can't see the the whole image of it. I don't know why it gets cropped like that, but I'm gonna go with God tier. I actually loved this book. I read it maybe 2-3 years now, so it's not something that I've read recently, but it stuck with me all this time. This is a second chance romance trope, and that's one of my favorite tropes ever, like top 2 favorites. So there's some bias a little bit because of that. But Tia Williams just does an amazing job of displaying how situations that happen when you're younger really do change you, and those kind of trauma bonds that you form with someone really do stick with you for the rest of your life. I will just leave it at that because I don't want to go into too much of like what the plot and premise is about. But what I do really remember about this was it was steamy, it's set in New York, and it was, again, very, very romantic. I also really appreciated the fact that our female main character suffers from an invisible disability, but it's still chronic pain nonetheless, and they're both authors. So I just really liked multiple different aspects of this book, and like I mentioned, for me to have read it multiple years ago and still think about it, God tier. We Never Got Over. Is that what it's called? We Never Got Over? We Never Got Over It, maybe? I know this is Lucy's score. This is a grumpy sunshine trope. And I'm gonna go with, honestly, You Should Pass. Now, 2 reasons why I say this. One is this book is like unnecessarily long. It's just really thick, and I don't think romances need to be that long, especially if they're not something completely like different or out of the realm of like what a regular romance is. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like if you're not giving me anything too new, don't make it longer than like 350 pages, and this book is very chunky. Now that I'm saying that, I do remember like the last bit of this book being kind of unconventional, but even then I don't think it had to be as long as it was, and this is part of a series, I think 3 books, so it's, again, doesn't have to be this long. Second reason I'm reading it in You Should Pass is because, again, this might be a bias, but I'm not a big fan of grumpy sunshine trope, because sometimes I feel like the grumpy man is like a rude man. And I don't want that in my romance. I want sweet, vulnerable, cheesy, romantic, not super cheesy, but you know what I mean. And this was just a little too brute, a little too tough guy for me, and I'm just not a fan of that. It's not one that's super memorable. I actually didn't even continue this series because I enjoyed it, but it's not something that I really actively recommend ever, or ever really think about it. Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I'm actually gonna go in this tier, You're Missing Out, because I actually really liked this book. It's a STEM-based romance, which Ali Hazelwood is queen of, and our main character here is Jack. I think that was his name, and he's just super romantic, and he is the type that like fell harder for our female character, and I love to see that. I love to see the yearning, the tension. It's kind of like a workplace romance too, in a sense. There's some like rivals edge to it. I just really liked this book. It's set in like the academia world, so you really kind of get that perspective as well, and you get to learn a lot about that kind of realm. Next up is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. This one, absolutely, you're missing out. Where should I put this? I actually really liked this book. I read it last summer, and this one has a really funny premise too. It's marriage for convenience trope, which sometimes is not my favorite. It's not the best. It's not written the best in my opinion. I feel like it can be a little lazy sometimes if it's not executed well, but this one was executed very well. Our main character, Anna, she is so funny. Her humor really makes this book, like it made it super memorable. The setting takes place on like this luxurious private island, and there's just it's almost outrageous because our male main character is like the heir to a grocery store chain. So it's just a bunch of these little random things, but when you put it all together in a well-written romance novel, it just works. It's the perfect summer vibe, and this one, the romance was also very believable, even though the premise itself would lend you, like I mentioned, marriage for convenience sometimes is not believable because they both are in this relationship for a reason, and this one, I'm just telling you, it's good. And next up is Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is actually my favorite book by Hannah Grace, so I'm obviously gonna put it in God tier. I rated this 5 stars. It's a college romance, so with that being said, for that specific genre, for that specific book, I think it was done really well. It takes place during a summer camp, and both of our main characters are camp counselors, and I just am such a sucker for that type of setting, so again, a little bit of bias there. But Aurora and Russ are just meant to be, in my opinion. They both really kind of get past the exterior, past like the shallow, almost attraction that they have for each other, and really dive deep into what is going on with each other, their family background, their traumas. Like, we definitely get into the trenches with these characters, and you just see their love and chemistry building throughout the book. I will say Russ was my favorite book boyfriend for a very long time. He is so vulnerable. When I talk about vulnerable male main characters, Russ comes to mind immediately because he really opens up with Aurora. He is the king of communication, which in a romance, I think that's just key. Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, immediately God tier. This is a 5-star, low-key a 6-star romance read. This is, I think, my favorite romance, which is so interesting because I didn't expect it to be that way when I first picked it up, but I'm telling you, the last like 25% of this book, it's so good. Jacob and Brianna are our main characters. Brianna's like a doctor. She works in a hospital, and so does Jacob. So they're both very much workplace romance, and it's much more than that, though. It's a lot deeper. Brianna's brother suffers from like a medical emergency, and Jacob really does help out with that. But with that being said, he struggles with his own, mental health problems, and I respect and appreciate Abby Jimenez for shedding a light on that and putting in some representation, because it makes the characters very two-dimensional. Jacob really kind of expands on his mental health journey and how different situations really affect him, how he views things. So that was really, really enlightening. And again, like I mentioned, the last 25% of this book had me seated. I just remember picking up my markers and annotating the heck out of the book because some of the quotes just had me floored. Better Than the Movies by, who's the author of this? Lynn Painter. This is a YA romance, which is really very funny because I'm not a big fan of those types of romances, but I'm actually gonna put it in the You're Missing Out tier. I actually was very, very pleasantly surprised at this book because I feel like it gave all the chaotic and nostalgic energy of a high school romance without the cheesiness of it. Like, there were still problems, but they were very much aged to our characters' aged, which are high schoolers. So there's just specific problems and maturity levels that come with being in high school and in a high school relationship. I went into this book thinking this is gonna be cheesy. A YA romance is not something I'm a huge fan of, but this one was just, again, very well written. I think I rated this like 4.5 stars. Almost a 5-star read. It was so good, and I cannot wait to continue the series. This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. I think I just put a lot of my favorites up front because this was also a really good one that I would definitely put. I'm gonna put it here in the You're Missing Out tier. This one's setting, Prince Edward Island, phenomenal. It's so atmospheric. There's like an oyster shucking competition. This book does a lot of things that are very memorable. Our main male character, Felix, he is a bookish person, which thank you, Carly Fortune, for giving us that. And this one, the main kind of situation is, it's basically best friend's brother. I still had a really fun time reading this. It's short, it's fast paced, and I just recommend it. Love Redesigned. I'm gonna go with decent because I read it, I had a good time. It was really long though, and I don't ever really think about it. I will be continuing this series though, so take that for what you will. It was entertaining enough for me to want to continue reading the series. Lauren Asher's romance books do tend to be very long, so I feel like I kind of just knew that and was mentally prepared for that. My favorite part was the fact that it was very much Latina representation. Our main characters are like Latinos, which love that. There's Spanish in there, so obviously I'm Mexican, so I can definitely relate to that, and there was like Spanish in there. Don't worry, there's translation, so it was just really nice in that sense, but it didn't really leave me with anything too memorable, but I still thought it was good. Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is one of those older book talk books, but it's one that I think is definitely God tier. I'm gonna maybe put it here because it's one of my top 5 favorite romance books for sure. I definitely love this book. I thought it was really, really cool because it's dual POV, dual timeline. It's basically childhood best friends to lovers, which is my favorite trope ever. That one and Second Chance Romance are dueling it out for like 1 and 2 in my opinion. Both of our characters are bookish people, which obviously I've mentioned it, I'll mention it again. I love reading books about people who love to read. And this one just kind of had a plot twist at the end that I was not expecting, but I thought it was well done. It really wrapped things up. It gives you understanding of why our characters did what they had to do. Moving on to Butcher and Blackbird. This one I'm gonna go with decent. I don't think you necessarily, okay, I'm gonna put it in this is hard. I'm gonna leave it there. You should pass, only because I feel like this book is it's for like a limited audience. It's not for everybody. I wouldn't recommend this to just anybody. It's a dark romance because it's about two serial killers who end up falling in love. So with just that being said, crazy. It's an outrageous premise, but actually respect, because that's something you think of would be interesting to read, and then this author really just put that into real life, and now I get to read it, and it's very interesting. It is extremely spicy and kind of more of a distinct type of spicy, so, you know, giving you the warning there. Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I'm gonna go with decent. I rated this, I think, 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it, although I feel like there's a lot of focus on a side character that her role in this book really was too big, in my opinion. If we would have just focused on our main characters, Scarlett and Lucas, and really just kept it on them, I would have loved this book even more. But I feel like our side character, who is Scarlett's best friend, really just takes like a big seat at the table when it was not necessarily important to do so. I think there are other better Ali Hazelwood books out there. You with a View. I'm gonna go with You Should Pass, because unfortunately the male main character in this book gave me the ick, and there's no going back from that. So unfortunately, I would definitely pass. I feel like I read it because it was very highly talked about, highly rated, but this just did not do it for me. In this book, basically, our female main character puts out a TikTok about like her grandparents' love story, trying to find out who her grandma's like partner was. And it goes viral, and then it leads to a road trip, which is a cute premise, but there was just miscommunication in here that was just too hard for me to overlook. Archer's Voice. This is definitely God tier. It's one of my top 5 favorite romance books. I think it's so cute. It's a small town romance. Both of our characters, Bree and Archer, are so unique and special. I think this is a very heartwarming and tender romance. It has one of my favorite scenes ever because you really see our characters care for each other, which, how do you write a better romance than two characters, two people just caring and loving each other so much? And there's some plot twists in here that I did not see coming, but I think it did really enrich the story, and it added to ultimately their relationship. So yeah, God tier, you have to read that book. Binding 13, a lot of you guys are gonna hate me, but I'm gonna go with decent. I liked it. I'm continuing the series. With that being said, Keeping 13 has taken me almost 3 months to read at this point. So, you know, I'm like, don't know really how to feel about it. This original book, Binding 13, I mean, it interested me enough to want to continue the series. But if I'm being honest, it's like a blur in my head. I don't really remember too much of it, or like specifics really to pinpoint. I know overall what happened, but I feel like I wasn't really missing out, and I feel like it's very overhyped. The Favorites by Lane Fargo. This book is chaotic. It is drama. It is God tier. Rated at 5 stars. I thought it was really fun. This one's action-packed. It's chaotic, like I mentioned. This relationship is toxic, but it's one that you kind of just cross your fingers and hope that they work out, because it's kind of iconic. They're professional Olympic hopeful figure skaters. When I tell you, this book gave me whiplash because I never knew what was going to happen next. It had jaw-dropping moments multiple times, and I was in for the ride. I was strapped in. Moving on, How to End a Love Story. I'm gonna go with You Should Pass. I read it, rated it like 3 stars. I remember the first 50% of it, I was not a big fan of. The last 50% of it, I was like, okay, I liked it. But overall, it's not memorable. I don't ever recommend this book. I kind of just forgot about it. It's a little forgettable. Daydream by Hannah Grace. This is sad, but I'm going to go with, I'm going to put it a decent, even though I personally rated it 2.5 stars. With that being said, I just think it wasn't the romance book for me, and that's okay. I still individually liked the characters, Hallie and Henry, a lot. Icebreaker, this is book 1. So this is book 1. And then Wildfire is book 2, Daydream is book 3. This one, I'm gonna go with it's decent also. I would recommend it, but I think honestly, if you're gonna read any of the Maple Hills like series, I would recommend Wildfire because in my opinion, it just has everything going for it. Icebreaker is like the first one to introduce you to everyone, to the characters, to the school, the setting. So obviously it has that going for it. I also did like it more than I liked Daydream. It's a figure skater and a hockey captain, and they're like enemies to lovers. So if you like that type of romance, then this is for you. But to me, it was probably like a 3.5-star read. The Dead Romantics, I'm just gonna go here. I think I rated this 3 stars. I don't ever think about this book. In fact, towards the end of it, I just wanted it to be over. It's a very kind of paranormal type of romance, and I don't read very many romances like that. And it just wasn't my favorite. I found it a little bit boring. I don't know. I didn't really buy that it was a romance either. It was just, it read more fiction to me. So that's why I'm reading it in the this is not romantic tier. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I think this is my least favorite Abby Jimenez book. Not that I disliked it, but just it's not as good as her other books in my opinion. So I'm gonna go with decent. I would put it maybe here, like the second place, because I still think it was cute. And it's the first book in an interconnected series. So if you want to read the rest of the books, I would recommend this one because you get to know the characters and they do make cameos and come out in the later books, and it's still a very decent romance. It's just not my favorite, so that's why I'm putting it in decent, because it's kind of mid-tier for me. Our last 2 books, Daisy Hates. This is book 2 in the Magnolia Parks universe, or like series, but the first Daisy Hates book. And I'm gonna go with God tier because this book gave me a book hangover, and I'm just obsessed with Daisy Hates, Christian Hems, Romeo, and Julian Hates. Like, those characters are so distinct and they're my favorites in the entire series. I really liked the multi-dimensional aspects to them. Daisy, like herself, is like a boxer, a cook, a medic, a student, a romantic. Like, there's just so many things about her that I love, and her family is so unique. Her brother Julian, he has his own story that is introduced to us in this book. Daisy and Julian both very traumatic past, but the way that they're currently living is like iconic in a sense. This is London high society, so you get a lot of wealth and a lot of danger, and then the romance is singular. It is so individual in the sense that I really haven't read anything like it, and I was so obsessed with Christian and Daisy. I need the third Daisy Hates book like yesterday. Last but not least, Ready or Not by Cara Stone. This is actually an interesting book because it's an accidental pregnancy, which I don't read very much of. And I'm not going to say it's not one of my favorites or it is one of my favorites. I just feel like I haven't read enough to really come up with that kind of opinion. But this book made it so that I didn't have like a bad taste in my mouth with that trope. So I'm going to go with You're Missing Out, and I'll put it, I think, here, right in the middle. I really liked it. This is one of those romances where it's almost like a black cat, golden retriever energy. Shep, our male main character, I love him. He is so adorable. And this had one of my favorite love scenes ever. Like, it just was so tender, and I think you guys get it. I like tender, heartwarming, romantic type of romances. And this one was definitely that. I like that our main female character had a lot going on, and she was going through a lot. She was thinking things through. There were so many different elements that, like, if I was in her shoes, I would not know what to do. So I was with her. Like, I appreciated her for dealing with some things in a very adult manner because, like I mentioned, I would not know what to do. So I liked that. This was the first book by Cara Stone that I ever read, and now I have read her next one, Promise Me Sunshine. And yeah, I really enjoy it. I think you guys should definitely read it because I think it's getting some hype, and for a good reason. It's just very romantic. And if you want a romantic romance read, then you should definitely read it. If not, you're going to be missing out. So this is my final tier list. We have our God tier ones that if you take anything away from this video, you have to read those first ones for sure. I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye!